Hi, this short video is to support trainers and educators who are looking to bring the toolkit into their environment. There are two ways you can use this toolkit. One is to speak to your fellow educators, going through the toolkit to understand the basics of generative AI and learning what they can take away and use with their students themselves. Or you yourself may want to take this toolkit straight into your students to get them to explore generative AI at the same pace as you are, going through the key learning points and objectives and trying out some of the exercises that are within them. First of all, let's deep dive into what's in the toolkit themselves. The first thing is you have the lesson presentation, which you'll find as a PPT. This is rich with content is the main part of the toolkit. I'll come back to this and discuss it in more detail. The second two pieces really support the main toolkit. The first one being the classroom agreement. You'll find that there as a PDF. The classroom agreement is designed to empower educators, to give them the tools to bring in generative AI in a safe and responsible way. Having this agreement ensures students understand the expectation from them when using generative AI tools and has a mutual agreement when you start off in this journey. The classroom agreement is designed as a first foundational step. As your school evolves and your own learning and experience of generative AI, you may want to add to this, use it as a foundation of somewhere where you can start with bringing in generative AI. And the next piece is the elements of a good prompt. This is a PDF as well, and it really supports how you come across and use a good prompt to get the desired results. I often hear from people, I've tried using generative AI tools and it's just not worked for me. What they really mean is I haven't understood the difference between searching and prompting and how to prompt the right result for me. Typically and traditionally, when we're looking for information, we will go and search. We will go to our browser, type in a question, and we will get tabs where we can go and have a look at what suits us as a result. With prompt engineering and generative AI tools, the thing we love about them is they can be very concise and specific. So you can put in exactly what you want and get the desired result. It is a skill, and it requires experiment and reiteration. And I'll explain that more in the main presentation. However, this PDF supports this conversation and knowledge. I would recommend you print it out and have it within the classroom. So when students are learning prompt engineering, you can refer back to the elements of a good prompt to ensure they're getting the right results for them and that the tools are working on their behalf. How to use the toolkit. The toolkit is used to learn the key learning objectives. So let's go and look at the main objectives within the main presentation. So if you're speaking to students or educators, it's important you get these key points across. As you work through the presentation, you'll see we've bookmarked key learning points. When you get to one of the slides with these key learning points there, please do pause and we invite you to sit and discuss the points and ensure that people have understood what the points of risk and responsibility are in these key sections. The first place we start within the presentation is describing the basics of generative AI and addressing the technology's limitations. Generative AI works by predicting patterns. It will go out there and look at large data and then understand the commonalities and predict the right result for you. In its nature, it will always come up with a result, which has its limitations because large data sets don't always mean they are factual all of the time. So there is a risk of inaccuracies. These type of limitations are presented throughout the presentation. After understanding this, what we want the key learning point to be is to learn prompt engineering. Something I just mentioned when we were discussing the importance and the elements of good prompts. Prompt engineering really helps us get the desired results we want, and through experiment and iteration, we can get those results. Now, as I said, there are limitations to generative AI products in the fact that they can give you misleading hallucinations or fabrications, and that's something we want to recognize within the product as well. So fact-checking becomes incredibly important and a key learning objective when working through the toolkit. Another point that we have within the toolkit, and it's important that you communicate to educators and students, is the importance of personal data and privacy while using these AI tools. If you're an educator and you're using generative tools as a co-pilot to support you in lesson plans and school reports, to design a curriculum for a child that needs specific learning outcomes, we have to think through what data we're putting into generative AI products and if it's safe and responsible to do so. On the other side, we need our students to think through this as well. Convenience of generative AI is wonderful, but sometimes we forget the security behind it and may be giving information to third parties with not the right policy or privacy agreements. As an educator, it's important before you bring in a generative AI tool that you look at its privacy policies, and we want to communicate this point when we're using the toolkit. The other point and the learning outcome we really want people to understand is to evaluate the potential of bias in AI-generated outputs and the implication behind that bias. Let's go back to how generative AI works. It trains on data sets, and many data sets will have human bias built in there, stereotypes. Stereotypes therefore exist within generative AI tools as well. It's important we talk to educators and students to recognize when they happen and to be able to eliminate them by recrafting their prompt or being aware that they can come up with a new outcome using their human thought process. We recognize that generative AI tools can feel like social companions. The nature of generative AI is they feel incredibly human-like in their voice and their tone. And for young minds, it can be incredibly confusing to what is real and what is not real. This is important to talk through with students to understand we cannot use AI companions in place of human interaction. And this is a core point we put across when using the toolkit. Because of this and the risks we see in generative AI, the toolkit is designed for those of 13 to 15 years of age. There are two reasons for this. One, the language and the storytelling within the toolkit is aimed at that audience to resonate and appeal to them. Secondly, many generative AI tools recommend usage only over the age of 13 because of the need for critical thinking skills when presented with outputs from generative AI tools. This resource can serve as a starting point for discussions about AI benefits and its risks. And this age range is a perfect age range to start that conversation. Let's take a look as a teacher how you can use the presentation within the classroom. You can run the entire presentation as a whole. However, we do recommend you break it down to 2 to 4 classes or lessons based on the time you have. The reason we do that is generative AI, we are learning at the same pace as our children. They are learning as we are, as it's such a new tool. By giving time between sessions, we give them time to critically think through, try, reiterate, experiment, and come back and have open discussions about what they've realized or thought. That time really helps support the learning and the usage of generative AI tools. How we believe you break this down, the PPT itself is broken down into key sections for educators to focus on, all of which have different elements, and you can pace the lessons accordingly. The first section is the introduction, and the introduction will talk about generative AI and large language models and how they work. It will then deep dive into prompt engineering, allowing the time, the space to understand what a good prompt is, what the difference between prompting and searching is, and also give it a try as well. After the introduction, we recommend you introduce the first character. The presentation has 2 characters that we use to aid us in the storytelling of how people are using generative AI today as a co-pilot in their careers, helping support them while they pilot their own projects. Gina is a journalist, and she uses the tools and crafting prompts to help her in her article. She does come up with issues, and she assesses the risks and she responsibly goes through actions to understand that she's not relying on the generative AI tools themselves alone. The third lesson would be the same, but with a totally different character. Alex, who's a gamer, who has amateur coding skills, but a great idea that he wants to bring to life. After these two sessions and looking at the risks and responsibilities they come across, we then believe it's time to give the children time to try, experiment, and then come back and look at the key takeaways, asserting those key learning points and checking and summarizing to ensure they actually understood them themselves. Throughout the presentation, there are try-it-yourself activities embedded throughout, designed to encourage students to explore various AI tools and applications. While these activities offer enriching experiences, they are not essential for meeting the overarching learning objectives. This flexibility makes the toolkit suitable for classroom use, regardless of the school's current status in adopting generative AI tools. Please do take your time to go through the PPT, watch the video, which will give you a longer understanding and definitions on how to use the PPT and each slide. We do recommend you use this toolkit for the age of 13 to 15, reiterating that as they learn and explore the toolkit.